It looks like a 1 minute warning here. Now, Councilor D'Andrade will not be joining us this afternoon, so we won't wait for her. So with that being said, I think we're all in our places. Let's give it that, wait for that clock to turn over to 3. There we are. Okay. Welcome everybody, or to welcome you to the Committee of the Whole for January 19, 2021, and acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I'll call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock and let everybody know that Councilor D'Andrade has sent her regrets. She's unable to join us this afternoon. Ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please. Councilor Crowell, thank you. Councilor Ludwig, assuming there's nothing else on the agenda to be added, all in favor? Thank you, that's approved. We have a number of items and reports. Just make a motion first that all of the reports be received. Councilor Crowell, thank you. Councilor Lumley, thank you. All in favor receipt? Thank you very much. And we'll go through, Council, I assume, has the updated agenda with the 2 additional items on it, or the additional items, sorry, from BDO Canada. And KNU, I see you in the room and invite you to please introduce yourself and then to proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present our audit planning report. I assume that you all have a copy of the report in front of you in your package. Yes. So I'll just jump right into the content of the report, as I know we're a little bit pressed on time today. I'll skip over the executive summary so that I can speak to the individual parts of the document itself, and I'll start on page 4 of the document titled Your Dedicated BDO Audit Team. So your BDO team this year is comprised of Paul Fripp, the engagement partner, supported by Brian Zabo, the quality assurance partner. Unfortunately, Paul and Brian couldn't attend this meeting this afternoon, so I will be speaking in their place. They send their regrets and apologies. I am the senior assurance manager on the engagement and have been working on this audit for quite a number of years now. And Narendra Rajput is the other manager who will be joining me in executing the audit this year. I'm going to skip to page 5, which outlines our audit timeline. So we're meeting here today so that I can go over the information that we're required to under Canadian audit standards to communicate to the Mayor and Council. We will meet again later in April in order for us to present our findings, and at that time we'll highlight any information or items to bring to your attention as a result of our audit. Moving to page 6, which is our key areas. So these are the areas of the audit that we focus on, either due to the materiality of the balance or transaction or because of any particular risk points that we consider. The first 2 points on page 6, these 2 audit areas are mandatory for all audits performed under Canadian audit standards. They're not risk specific to the town. So I'll just highlight that they're not specific to the organization, but they are mandatory. The first one being management override of internal controls, and auditors always consider this because regardless of how strong of a system of controls an organization might have, management always has the ability to override these controls. And of course, because of this, we always pay particular attention to this risk area. The second risk area that's mandatory for our consideration is revenue recognition due to fraud. So as part of this test, we will be looking at source documentation such as funding agreements, in order to determine if there's been any judgment applied by management in determining revenue recognition. Skipping to page 7, these are areas that are specific to the town. Well, I guess the first one being COVID-19, maybe not applicable just to the town, but applicable to the entire world. But because of the significant impacts of COVID-19 and the global pandemic to the world economy and the world as a whole, we do consider its impacts to our audit. We do not anticipate any significant financial statement impacts, as the town has been able to collect its revenues, and operationally, the impacts have not been very material and compared to some other municipalities, but we will consider this as part of our testing. The two areas we also consider are staff salaries and developer contributions. Staff salaries, of course, being one of your largest expenditures, and developer contributions because of the variability in contracts from year to year. Moving on to page 8. Materiality. So materiality, for the purposes of our planning, because we do not have final year-end figures yet, has been set at $300,000. So that doesn't mean that we don't look at anything under $300,000. This is a threshold we use to determine whether or not the financial statements are materially misstated, but we do use a much lower threshold when we're performing our testing. And anything below 5% of materiality, we will report to Mayor and Council if any errors exist. Now I'm going to skip over some of the appendices. I'll leave that to you to read in your spare time, but I will jump to page 14, which does address the auditor's responsibility with respect to fraud. The audit is not designed to detect fraud, but we will report any fraud that does come to our attention. I'd like to pause at this time to ask this council whether or not they are aware of or suspect instances of fraud this year.
No, as mayor, I have no awareness of or suspicion of. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Again, that's a mandatory question we do have to ask, and we've asked the same of management, and they've provided the same response.
Yeah.
I'll also direct you to Appendix E of our report on page 16 that does provide some useful links that BDO provides in terms of information that you might find useful. You can click directly on the report and it'll bring you to those websites. And Appendix F in our report starting on page 17 does highlight some changes in public sector accounting standards that are upcoming. The most significant is the upcoming asset retirement obligation standard that will become in effect in 2022. It's being pushed forward a year because of COVID, but it will require the town to determine whether there are any liabilities for asset retirement. It was quick in terms of the content of our report, but I'll just pause here for any questions.
Thank you, Kayan. Questions, Council. First, does Council have any questions of the process? It's an annual process. Could I take you back to page 7, please? Other potential key audit areas?
Yes.
One thing that's concerned me, not concerned me, but I'd be interested in relative to other communities, are legal costs. The amount of legal costs that the town incurs and cost recovery on those legal costs. Is that something you ever look at in terms of numbers to see if they are reasonable and in line with what the municipality of the side might expect to incur?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's an excellent question. So as part of our audit, we do look at legal invoices and communicate directly with certain firms that the town may use. But that purpose is used to determine whether there are any outstanding liabilities. We don't provide an analysis or do any analysis of whether there's value for money or efficiencies in terms of legal expenses, but that's something that we could easily add to our audit this year, just to provide this council a quick overview of the year-to-year trend in dollars used in litigation.
It would be something I'd be interested in. I don't know how the rest of the council feels. Something interesting. And the other side of that, of course, is there are opportunities to go through legal costs for some cost recovery. It's not very extensive or very proportionate, but to make sure that we are actually doing our own due diligence and taking advantage of those as we should be, as we have that opportunity. Thank you. Councillor Lumley.
I could probably report that we spend more on legal fees than a lot of most communities, but my question would be, has anything changed? Like in the last year, has anything changed as far as like auditing, like a municipal government?
Yeah, excellent question. So nothing significant has changed in terms of Canadian audit standards. I think across the board, additional time has been spent with respect to the impacts of COVID-19, testing to see if controls has changed because some organizations are working remotely or processes have changed to adapt to a remote work environment. We did consider that when we performed our interim testing in December, but there's nothing that was brought to our attention or anything that we identified that would lead to a significant change in our audit approach this year.
Thank you. Council, do you have any further questions? Okay, we see the audit schedule is listed there in the document. That gives some sense of the timing as to how this will go through, and we will receive a further presentation on the results of your report, I guess, towards the end of end of April timeframe.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to that, and look forward to seeing you around the halls with masks on.
Hopefully we'll be able to attend in person, but we'll see.
Good, okay. Do you have anything else for us?
No, unless there's any additional questions for me, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Staff, any questions, any comments? Director of Finance?
No questions from me, Mr. Mayor. Just I appreciate the BDO has kept their audit team quite consistent over the years, so we really get benefit from that. The team that BDO we work with are quite familiar with the town, so it does save some time and efficiencies in the audit process. So looking forward to working with Cayenne and her team pretty quick here. Yeah.
We're just missing Bill Cox.
Yes, yeah, we're missing Bill Cox for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Cayenne. We'll see you in April, if not sooner.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is Chief Rob Mitchell of the Gibsons and District Fire Volunteer Fire Department for a quarterly report for fourth quarter 2020. Chief, are you with us? Thank you. I see you. Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we have a copy of the report. Council has received a copy, so please proceed your presentation. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, the fire department currently sits at 41 members, with 33 of those members having their NFPA 1001 standard for firefighter professional qualifications. The focus on training for this quarter was completion of the interior program, live fire training, vehicle extrication, and emergency scene management. The fire department responded to 68 calls for service in the fourth quarter of 2020, including a structure fire, a rescue for a child stuck in a fence at a local elementary school, a mutual aid request for a fire at a lumber yard in Seashelt, in a storm that resulted in 4 simultaneous calls requiring the activation of a department operations center. The storm came and went very suddenly, resulting in multiple agencies working together, including the Town of Gibsons bylaw and parks. and their assistance was greatly appreciated. The fire prevention team completed 39 fire and life safety inspections, 1 fire investigation, 7 referrals, and no public education sessions. However, I'm looking forward to reporting on some creative fire safety education and fire prevention initiatives during my next quarterly report. The fire department received no calls for service related to fireworks on Halloween. However, it was noted there was an incredible reaction on social media. A contract has been awarded for the replacement of the fire department's initial attack apparatus. A pre-build meeting was completed last week, and the project is moving forward on time and on budget. 2021 proposals include a career deputy fire chief, sanitation for fire department facilities, a hazardous materials response trailer, rescue truck upgrades, and an emergency generator, as well as health benefits for volunteers. Finally, I'd wish to confirm if there's any additional information or statistics or reduction of that Mayor and Council would like to see included in the fire department quarterly reports. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Council, I'll turn to Council first for questions. Councillor Ladwig.
Thanks, Chief. Rob. I appreciate your report, and I just want to say it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I really liked your thoughts on establishing a task force next Halloween to kind of go around and talk to folks about our fireworks bylaw. I think that's a great idea. That's something that I was kind of kicking around as well, seeing if whether or not we would have the resources to support that. I just also wanted to bring to your attention that in our, if I understand correctly, our bylaw right now says that, as you noted in your report, fireworks are allowed with a permit, but firecrackers are not allowed. And I don't know this statistically, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of complaints that we get are actually people frustrated with the firecrackers that are going off constantly all Halloween. And so I think if we started really educating people about the fact that those are just not allowed in Gibsons, that might help with the whole firework debate, because I think there's a lot more of those going off than there are fireworks. So it's just a little distinction that I think we should start educating the community about. So anyways, thank you for that suggestion. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that one, unfortunately. I believe that was coming from some emails. I think we had the Director of Planning, and we had Staff Sergeant Hallam from the RCMP was making those kind of suggestions. We're just jumping on board, right? And with anything, the fire department really appreciates an education first approach. And so along with those suggestions, we've also thought about getting on the communications early for next year as well, and engaging the communication managers up and down the coast to have some of that messaging incorporated with it as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Chief, on page 8 of your report, you refer to lock boxes. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, unfortunately, some of our lock boxes were damaged and forcibly entered to gain access to some buildings in Gibsons. Fortunately, we were alerted to it very quickly and cooperated with the RCMP as they continued their investigation here. So it's caused a little bit of trouble for the fire department, where we don't have the readily accessed keys for buildings that we would normally have on site. So we've pulled our keys out to prevent anything further from happening here. And it's going to be quite a challenge if we need to get some access without damaging properties. So we're looking at some alternatives. Some have been brought forward to me already, but these alternatives with the additional security measures, which are beneficial, unfortunately come at a higher cost. So I'll be doing some further research to find out what beneficial next steps we could take here.
Okay, thank you. Well, seeing no further questions, Chief, we've already received your report. I want to thank you again for the work your department did in 2020. And how did COVID affect you, do you find?
I'd say we were both smart and lucky. We made some pretty bold moves in early on, and that really helped us pave the path for what turned out to be the majority of the year. We split into response groups rather than entire department, practicing on different nights, canceling practices for quite some time. But there's still some repercussions from that. My volunteers are feeling a little bit segregated. They're not feeling that team cohesion, which is really challenging. A big reason why they join is because they like the interaction with their peers and the social activities. So they're really missing that, as with most in the community and worldwide. So that's been a challenge. And additionally, the workload on some staff members has increased, and for the training officer almost tripled, where we're holding 3 separate practice nights rather than the once weekly. So we have our recruits practicing on Wednesday nights, and the other crews alternating between Tuesdays and Wednesdays each week. So we've certainly been recognizing the challenge, but we think that there's putting the safety of our members and community first is the approach that's helped us be lucky thus far. So we're really hoping we can continue on being safe, being smart, and preventing any exposures here or to the community. But it certainly has impacted the department.
Yeah, thank you for that, and please express our appreciation for your membership.
I love doing that. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on. Chief, you're welcome to stay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Okay, we have before us now the COVID-19 Safe Restart Community Grants report. And Director of Finance, I see you're on there. Would you like to present us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as your council's aware, back in November, we received just over 1.5 million in grant funding for the COVID Safe Restart program. And this is a one-time grant that's been provided to assist local governments across the province to address unexpected operational costs throughout the duration of the pandemic, which is expected to last well into 2021 and maybe potentially into 2022 as well. The majority of funding will be directed to support core municipal operational areas as per the criteria that was listed in the grant award. There is, though, a provision for governments to issue funds to local not-for-profit organizations that provide services for vulnerable persons. This report was developed in response to Council's motion of January 5th regarding options to distribute a portion of these grant funds to eligible organizations. And so staff met to discuss potential options, and we have a draft program for the committee's consideration. It includes a notification of the program, an application section, an award process, and then also an award notification component. And I've attached draft documents for the committee's review. The goal in drafting the initial draft of this program was to have a process which was as streamlined as possible, so funds can be distributed to eligible organizations in need quite quickly. We are looking for direction on feedback on the process, of course, open to council input, of course. Revisions, if any, to the application content or format, total amount that council will be looking to fund to be awarded in this section. Any limits on individual awards, if you're looking at that kind of criteria. Discussion about list of organizations being invited or potentially opening it up to the whole community, like we do grants of assistance and getting them to apply. And then also just some timing on deadline for submission to get a sense of what council would like for timing. And so as mentioned, I'm putting this forward as a starting point for discussion and open to council feedback on really how you want this grant program to be structured. So open to questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I thank you. This did come forward as a result of my presentation to council, so perhaps I'll have a first stab at comment. And I appreciate you've addressed many of the issues that I was concerned about. I looked at the list and I initially thought to myself, about the churches being on there. Then I realized that it is intended to offset costs for organizations providing supports to vulnerable people, and there are those kind of specific areas that there may be programs. For example, the the Salvation Army is going to be providing the shelter. So maybe there's issues there that they may not need assistance because they're doing it under the auspices of BC Housing. But if there were assistance required and they needed kind of a quick response or a quick turnaround, perhaps we could participate in that. I'm comfortable with the amounts. I would like this to be kind of an open grant through the year, not just tied to a March or a September deadline. If something comes forward during process, that I think we should be able to accommodate that. And it shouldn't be just for 2020 costs. Obviously, it should be 20 costs that maybe they have occurred and cost their budget, or costs that they may occur going forward in 2021 for projects that they may get involved in. Things like the Harbor Authority may have not have obvious costs, but they may have increased sanitation costs for their washroom that they have down there, for example. We might have to think on the box and help them think of some costs, but that's the type of thing that where they might have a cost that would be particularly related to the COVID issues and people who are using the washroom on a regular basis. So that I think if we can make it available, I mean, it's not capital, it's not intended to build buildings or renovate structures, but it is intended to kind of offset those kind of costs that may be related, such as the plastic barriers or things of that nature that people have had to incur money for. So I'll put it over to council. Does council have any comments they'd like to make? Councillor Lumley.
Thank you. I have to admit, like at the first proposal, I was a little concerned, maybe worried. Yeah. But now that, I mean, obviously on the agenda, I can see that we've capped it at, you proposed a $25,000 cap on it. I'm less worried. And my worry is that, again, I don't know if I've reiterated this or said this before, but COVID is going to stretch right through to 2022. And I'd really like to kind of, unless it's an emergency, and I know we've upgraded some things for the town hall to operate as they should properly. I would like to see and wait till, you know, we see what happens with taxpayers. I mean, like as far as cash flow to the town, because who knows how many people might defer their taxes this year. Some people might be able not to pay their taxes. I'm just not sure. I'd like to get a bit more this year under our belts before we go on a spending spree. So the $25,000, I think that's great. Extending past the budget, I couldn't agree more. Also, the consultant, he's not part of the 25,000. That's above and beyond this you would say, I would assume. And the other thing is that I know it says not for profit, but some of the, like say Shack is just an association. They're not a non-profit organization. And my question would be if Shack could use some of this money, obviously, like predominantly, I would say the most vulnerable people, because I've talked to a lot of people and there's a lot of people doing well during the pandemic, believe it or not, but probably the homeless, you know, people that need food, so on and so forth. I'd kind of want to heavily pivot into that area, organizations that are helping those people, obviously. And Shack's one of them, but they're not, I guess, I don't know, I guess we're just talking now, but would we funnel funds through the Sunshine Coast Community Services, or I just don't know how it would work. So anyway, those are my questions.
They are an organization, even though they're not a not-for-profit or structured as a society. And I noticed that in terms of our broader grant of assistance program, that we do have that kind of opening there that is for other groups, and as opposed to having to be an organization, have with an organized structure. So I would certainly think that any group or organization that providing support to the vulnerable sector should be considered and be eligible to put forward a request. Personally, Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Sort of along the lines of what Councillor Lumley was suggesting, I think something that's really important is in the application that people are able to legitimately prove the costs they've incurred, COVID related, and that they haven't been reimbursed from other sources. Because I know in some areas, there is reimbursement available for COVID-related costs, both through the province and other areas. So I would like to. I think the money that's been designated at this point is reasonable, but I think there needs to be legitimate proof that they've had a legitimate cost and it hasn't been reimbursed from any other area. Thank you.
Yeah, that should be either a proof of or a statement to the effect of on an application. What would you think would be in terms of proof that they have not been reimbursed?
Well, first of all, there would have to be, legitimate proof of, the costs incurred. Like, for example, I do the bookkeeping for a search and rescue unit, and I can tell you to the penny what it's cost us in COVID-related expenses. But having said that, we did receive a partial reimbursement through Canadian Coast Guard.
Yeah.
So, it's, I could say I've got a $2,500 COVID-related expense and we're a registered nonprofit and charity, but I would feel very guilty applying for money from the town to cover costs that we've been partially reimbursed on. So I think, it's a case of, and I don't want to make it more difficult for the administration of it, but I would appeal to people's sense of fairness that, they don't try and double dip.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Ludwig?
I can't remember how much can someone remind me how much we anticipate the pot being that we can distribute to community nonprofits after municipal expenses have been covered? Maybe Director of Finance?
The suggestion for this particular community grant program, the mayor had suggested $25,000 total for this one. It's difficult to estimate what leftovers are going to be. As Councillor Lumley mentioned, we still have a full year, maybe another year and a half to go through operating expenses of the town. So the majority are being held for those purposes because that's what the grant is for. But there is a avenue to push them out to the community.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood this report then. So that's not 25,000 per organization. That's
no.
Total.
25,000 total.
We're thinking 1,000 for each. Maybe I just don't understand.
Up to 1,000 for each. And in addition to that, there's still the grant of assistance program that's there for other projects that programs that they have. So they just strictly offsetting COVID-related costs.
Okay. Was there's no conditions attached to this funding that if we don't spend it by a certain point that we have to give it back, like we have to in the federal government, where if you don't spend?
This funding where we have to account for it, how it's being spent. But I don't believe there's any kind of a requirement that we have to reimburse anybody for or pay it back. Yeah.
So we could, because the 25,000 out of, I know we've got a lot of municipal costs as well, but 1.5 million is a lot of money.
Well, we've already spent 300,000 plus of it, as you recall already, and that was to offset the cost of the computer upgrades that we did to enable our staff to work remotely. And as those things go forward, I think that might be other costs. I can also say that the regional district has starting to reach out and look for ways that we might be able to assist them in some costs. The regional district's got quite a low amount relative to local governments, And, you know, and I understand that they're concerned about that. They did not agree with the reasons why, but they are also looking to the local government to maybe assist them with some of their costs. So we will be receiving a request from the regional district on some of that money as well. And we may choose to help them with their costs or to not, depending upon how much. On the coast here, the Seashell got 2.5 million, Gibson's got 1.5 million, the regional district got about 500,000, and the Sunshine Coast City government got about 300,000. So that's how it broke down on the coast. And then in addition to the 500,000 that the regional district got, they got 800,000 for transit, in addition to the other 500,000. And they feel that they were not treated fairly in that process. And it may well be that the minister will say, well, talk to your local government partners if you want more money. We'll see. Yeah. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Oh, I'm sorry. There was completely forgotten what I was going to. Oh, I know what it was. With respect to the computer upgrades, I believe we are looking at having to do a telephone upgrade at the Municipal Hall, and I'm just wondering if we have any idea of what the cost on that's going to be.
I'd have to go to whoever's looking after that.
That COVID related?
Yeah.
Telephone upgrade?
It is, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, it is COVID related. A part of that is a lot of our costs coming up are going to be, again, to enable staff to be working remotely, and the existing phone system does not allow us to facilitate that really easily. It's quite cumbersome. The other areas that we're seeing costs are, again, physically distancing staff in the physical buildings. Also with staff out in fleet, we're having a duplication of certain fleet. When we're replacing our annual fleet replacements that are coming up, we're keeping the original fleet unit and then getting another one and having a double until we are able to go back to normal where staff can share fleet units. So we are seeing some ongoing costs, and this is of course in addition to the cleaning and X-ray protocols that we have to do. So, and they're going to keep going, and that's sort of the purpose of this grant. And we'll be bringing that, of course, to council in the general budget operations that's going to be coming in late February, and we'll outline the COVID costs at that time.
Thank you.
So I guess going back to the Director of Finance, what direction did you need from us today? Looking at the specific resolutions be received for consideration. Was there specific direction or decisions we should be giving at this time? I'm comfortable with the amount. I'm comfortable with the limitation on amount. I do think we can, in the letter that goes out, make some suggestions relative to what those kind of costs might be. For example, personal protection equipment, perhaps for members, offsetting costs for additional, if they had to take out like, I don't know, Zoom memberships or whatever that were different, and different things like that they might have incurred a cost on or have an ongoing cost for. That's the type of thing that I could see that we're kind of offsetting. It could be an operational cost, such as I mentioned, some of the places like the Playhouse Theatre, if they're not able to cover their operational costs, that maybe we have to look at how we can assist in that area. So, Councillor Ludwig?
I think the letter should more clearly state how much individual groups can be awarded, because I would think we were offering 25,000 and $1,000. Not everyone's going to want to apply for. So I just think the expectation should be set.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, we should do that. Yeah.
Okay, so to you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got the amount total 25,000. The cap that council is looking for is $1,000 per organization. What are your thoughts on the confirmation of organizations that are eligible, because there are some potentially that we haven't identified. Do you want a letter specifically out to the list, and then are there more, or do you want to do more of a advertisement like we do grants of assistance in terms of general to the public, or what do you feel about that?
I think those ones that we have the liaison with, I mean, it's pretty easy for us to go out in the liaison capacity. So, I mean, like the Gibson District Library Board, even though we are part of a regional function with them, they still do provide that pretty much a direct service through here. And there may be some individual costs that they would look at and say, yeah, we had a cost that we're actually having to go out and apply for a tax increase this year to offset that cost. If they were to receive some additional funding, their tax increase might be lessened, their request might be lessened. So that might apply to, I don't know, the fire department, I don't know. But we can take a look and just see how we can help with those costs. I would say the $25,000 is a cap. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be replenished during the year if we had more demand or more things to look at. And we just come back to council and take a look at the overall budget, what we have in there, what the demands are on it. And I think that it certainly is. We're almost kind of delivering what would be a minor provincial program because they gave us the money to do that sort of thing. And then that's in that sense. Councillor Ladwig?
Sorry, once again. Maybe in the application, I mean, it might be worthwhile asking them to outline their expenses associated with COVID, knowing that we'll give them $1,000 for it. But it's a good exercise for any organization to kind of sit down and document what COVID has cost them, and then that might give us a more realistic thought if we want to replenish the fund in the future. Like if you know, like one plexiglass is at least $500. So you know, I think people have probably spent a lot more than $1,000 on COVID, and so you know, it'd be good to get a sense of what people are spending, and they can submit that with their application, and then that gives us a better idea for a second round if we want.
And we're not the only organization offering assistance. I mean, the Community Foundation was also had a program for offering assistance, and it is possible to make other grant applications. This is more just a small on the ground, how can we help and how can we help now type of program without having to wait for annual or biannual intakes and things of that nature. If you got the cost now, we could help you. I guess the one process on that is how do we kind of control that? Do we want that to come back to council for the awarding those costs, or can we delegate that to staff to say, okay, here's the application, it meets all our criteria, please proceed, and otherwise it gets very cumbersome. I see Councillor Ladwig acknowledging that with a shake of the head. Council comfortable with that process of saying that we would leave that up to staff to manage this process, given that it's not a lot of funds and dollars involved. Director of Finance?
Would council like a report? So two questions. One about deadline. What, if any, deadline? So it sounds like your council, the committee's happy with the list that we have there. So we could send out basically the invite. And because, Mr. Mayor, as you mentioned, that this is basically an open process, if more organizations are identified, then they could submit at that time. But in terms of reporting back, so award decisions at the staffing level, would the committee want to see a report at some point during the year to see?
I think in your quarterly reports, you should report on the status of the fund and the awards given. And if there's any questions arise, you certainly bring them back to council for consideration. I think that we have to make the letter very clear that what this is for, and that the expectations are that it might be part of a recovery, but it may not be the whole recovery. So that if it helps them to move forward. And I certainly at this stage, and I don't think I see the staff is not anticipating requiring a consultant to assist us with this. Do I understand that?
That's right. We did do a review and discussion of the program, and we felt that in some ways that just adds another layer. And so we thought we could potentially, depending on the design of it, do it in-house. It is a bit of a tricky time of year, but if we keep it relatively straightforward, which was what the design was, that should be manageable. We will add the suggestions in terms of on the application, a bit more information in terms of what the costs are, a confirmation that the organization hasn't received a reimbursement for that, and potentially through you, Mr. Mayor, because you are the cover letter on the, we'll obviously go through that with you to make sure you're happy with the letter before that's sent out. So
And it could be, as Councillor Kroll alludes to, the Marine Search and Rescue, they might have got reimbursement for some costs, but not fully reimbursed.
Yes,
It'd be up to them to say that, and say that we got 75% of our costs reimbursed. We are still out this money.
yes.
And hey, that would be acceptable as well.
Yeah.
CAO, do you see that it's been administratively cumbersome for staff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Certainly, it's we prefer this process for the reasons that Lorraine has outlined, and I think we'll keep the same going forward and receiving this. I think, yeah, just saving time and avoiding duplication of work. It would have taken us just as long to put out an RFP as preparing this.
Yeah, I
before we
appreciate
realized it.
that. Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, I don't know if I guess it's been said in different ways, but, and Councillor Cole was talking about recovering benefits, but I would just like to make sure that you're going to look at it. I guess you're going to vet the letter that goes out, but the actual form, I mean, it's it's not, these are COVID related expenditures, not because, I mean, the on the shack meeting, or no, it was on the communication meeting with BC Housing. The Salvation Army reported this was like their biggest cattle drive year ever.
Yeah.
So it's not a fundraiser. It's like definitely it has to be related to. That's all. I'm just, you know what I mean.
We'll make it very clear what the relationship is, and also the source of the funds, so we received it. And I would see some of the organizations on this list not submitting, but hey, I think that if they can submit an argument for the funding, that our priority should be that organizations be made as whole as they can be. We're not going to be solve all of their problems, and we need to make this as simple and as quick paying out to the community as we can, and that's really the priority. So if we can do that, I think we've accomplished something. Councillor Ledwig?
One last comment. I would like to see the fire department added to this list if.
Sure. Yeah. Volunteer fire department. Yeah. And what about Marine Search and Rescue? And I don't want to put Councillor Kroll on the spot, but they are a volunteer community in our society, in our community, that they are providing a service, and I think that they should be as eligible as anybody else. So thank you, Councillor Kroll.
Well, I appreciate the offer, but you know, we are in a fairly good financial situation, and I think there are groups in the community that are probably you know, have greater needs than us at the moment.
Appreciate it.
We've been faced with a very generous community that have supported us in a lot of ways, and BC Gaming, recognized the COVID impact, and that, you know, any one of these people who applies to BC Gaming is potentially getting funding from them as well. So, you know, that's why I sort of emphasize the importance of double dipping, because, you know, there are organizations who probably don't qualify for some of these other areas. And, you know, I don't want to make it more onerous on staff to administer, but I think that's, you know, just putting your hand out because your name's on a list. I don't think is appropriate. I think they really need to justify.
Justify it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Okay, with those changes, is there a resolution we can craft around that, or is it, I'd rather not force this to come back to us, if we go to council directly as a resolution, coming out of committee, so that, that a community COVID grant program, be initiated with a $25,000 cap and a $1,000 application cap, $25,000 fund from the COVID restart monies, and a $1,000 cap per application for not-for-profit organizations and groups in the community who have incurred costs in 2020 and may incur costs in 2021, COVID-related costs in 2021. That's as simple as that, and to be administered by staff as appropriate. Okay. Director of Finance.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The only one other detail is that in the grant criteria that the societies that would be applying do show that they're providing services to support vulnerable people in the community.
Yes, okay, yeah, okay. We can add that into a resolution.
Thank you.
And corporate officer, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I think that was clear.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Lumley, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'd just like to add Shaq to the list as well.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And the list is not exhaustive. Other organizations that we haven't thought of can come forward, but these are the ones we'll reach out to. Yeah. Councillor Kroll?
Just sort of further to Councillor Lumley's comment, are we going to put this out as the grants of assistance, making it more widely available, or is it just restricted to the list?
No, be widely available. We'll put on a ask that news release be put out about it, and that the application process be online, so that people can just go on our website and get it. Yeah. Now, these are the ones that we want to maybe bring it to their attention that we can think of, but there may be others. As I say.
Thank you.
They should be community-based in somewhat, though. We're not reaching out the whole coast. They're going to be Gibsons community-based.
So sort of as you verbalized, is that the motion you were making?
That's the motion that I'm suggesting as we verbalize.
I would second that.
Councilor Ladwig is prepared to move that, and seconded by Councilor Kroll. Further discussion? None. Thank you very much. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. And thank you, staff, for working on that in a timely way. I think it's important that we do follow through with the mandate of the funds that were given to us by the province, and show how we're doing that. I know that there are organizations out there who are looking for help, and we can be helped in a small way. So thank you. Any further on that before we move on to the next issue, is the advisory design panel? Okay, so hearing none, we'll go then to the staff report on the advisory design panel, and the Director of Planning and Director of Corporate Services to come forward.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can introduce this, and then if the Director of Corporate Services has anything to add, she can add afterwards. But this report presents an alternative structure to the existing Planning and Development Committee, and introduces a terms of reference in the form of a bylaw for an advisory design panel. The difference between the PDC and the design panel is that the PDC consists of council and 2 community members, community volunteers, and the design panel would include 6 community volunteers and a member of council as a liaison in a non-voting capacity. The scope of the work for the design panel is also narrowed. So it includes anything referred to it from the planning department with a focus on design. So form and character development permits, zoning amendments, and OCP amendments. So the design panel would advise the director of planning or the planning department, as well as council, on the design quality of these development applications. So the design panel membership would consist of 2 architects, 1 landscape architect, and 3 others with a combination of backgrounds in engineering, urban planning, accessibility, community heritage, real estate, industry, construction, affordable housing, building design, arboriculture, crime prevention, and other fields related to form and character. And the new structure would provide a greater opportunity for input from professionals and members of the public to advise on a development application before it lands on council's table for a decision. So this report recommends proceeding with the new design panel structure and giving the bylaws 3 readings. It also recommends recruiting volunteer membership once the bylaw is adopted, and also recommends disbanding the Planning and Development Committee upon the establishment of the design panel and adoption of the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. And corporate officer, would like to add in that before discussion?
No, I think that covers it. If anyone has any direct questions about the bylaw itself, I can answer those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, over to council. Council, have any initial thoughts or questions for staff? Councilor Ladwig first.
So thanks, Director of Planning. It's a great report, and I really like the direction that this new advisory panel is taking. I would like to make one suggestion, and I do apologize that I didn't mention this when we were discussing this earlier, because I'm hoping this doesn't throw a big wrench into things. But I was wondering if, and I like that we've narrowed the scope down to those 3 bullets: form and character, zoning amendments, and OCP amendments. I think that's great. I am wondering how council and staff would feel about also adding town projects to this list. So it would be from the planning and development as well as engineering department. And when I say town projects, I'm not talking about everything. I don't need to, this committee doesn't need to see infrastructure, technical infrastructure, but things like Armour's Beach improvement proposals that the town that we're designing, Gibsons Way sidewalk improvements, like that whole kind of project. Like it would be nice to have, I don't know, maybe someone from TRAC on this committee and have them providing input to us on, well, you know, people that are using these services that we're designing and implementing in our community added to this list. I see Councillor Lumley not agreeing.
I'm sorry. I mean, nothing against TRAC, but I don't think we can have like special interest groups or anybody kind of related that might bring their own agenda into any planning. Like,
right.
You know, sorry, just.
Okay, no, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I see that point, but I still don't.
See Georgia Beach from here, it doesn't need a bike lane. So okay, everything's good down there. So yeah.
Okay, but I don't want to. So let me take away the TRAC comment. I still would like community input in things like Armour's Beach design, Gibson's Way design. I still think it would be good to hear from the community on it. So.
Yeah, see Councillor Kroll, then Director of Planning.
No, I agree with what Councillor Lumley was saying about special interest groups. And a lot of times, you know, when proposals are put out, you know, planning do ask for input from other areas. And I think generally we have seen in reports that, you know, they do reach out to some of these groups if the planning department feels that it's, you know, important that, you know, some of these special interest groups do respond. So I think that base is sort of covered. You know, I do agree, you know, with town, you know, ongoing town projects, but I think I sort of interpreted that to be within the scope of what this panel would be looking at. You know, the town is also a sort of a potential developer, as it were. So correct me if I'm wrong, Director of Planning, wouldn't town projects be included under the vision of this group as well?
Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, so the way the terms of reference or the bylaw is written is anything like the Planning and Development Services Department can refer anything to it. The scope is more about the design quality, but council and corporate officer, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe council can refer anything to this committee if you wanted some additional input. So there is a provision in terms of what they should consider when reviewing an application, and part of that is how does it contribute to or improve the public realm. So that would be the street frontages, the circulation, that piece of it. So I think there is room in the existing bylaw as written to widen that scope.
Corporate officer.
I was just going to say that's exactly right. So the bylaw, it basically has some suggestions for items that will regularly go there, but with the preface that that's including but not limited to. So items can be sent there from the planning department or from council.
Councillor Kroll.
I'm the only, I like the idea of it. I think it's, really great getting a more diverse, view on some of the projects that, are coming into the community. The only thing that I'm a little worried about is when we go back to the, when we were recruiting for the Planning and Development Committee, we didn't have a lot of respondents. And I was looking back through my notes, trying to see what criteria we had set. And a lot of the boxes that we're looking for in this were in the previous sort of invitation to participate. So I'm just, I love the idea. I'm just hoping that we do get the community response towards it, because we didn't have a lot of people respond to the Planning and Development Committee. And I would also, we have a couple of people on the Planning Development Committee, and should they be interested, would they be required to reapply completely, or could they just say we are interested in continuing in our role, in the roles we have? Because I sort of very much value what they've done in their participation so far. I believe their term was 2 years, which is up in March.
Director of Planning.
So I think because this is it's a new advisory group, we would ask them to reapply or say they're interested. We've got their resume on file, but it would come to council to appoint the members. So council could reappoint them as new members.
Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I mean, taking from Councillor Kroll, that was on my mind too. I was thinking, well, if you transition in this with two people that already kind of know the process and have been active on so far, and almost get the gist or understand what may or may not go towards council and in what form, I think it'd be like almost beneficial, or I wanted to say imperative, but that's not the case. They'd have to agree to it, but I mean, it'd be pretty beneficial to have those guys pony up again for another term. So anyway.
I agree. I think we should reach out to them, and as Director of Planning says, give them that opportunity to put their name forward. But because it's a new appointment to a new committee, they'd have to be reappointed. So, Councillor Ludwig.
It sort of begs the question, though, Councillor Kroll's comment. What do we do if we don't get enough expressions of interest? How will we deal with that as a council?
Yeah.
Bridge we cross when we get to it.
Yeah, I think that I know that there are people in the community or in the greater community who are interested in providing service, and I can think of one senior planner, for example, who has expressed that he'd like to be involved in something, and that type of thing that we could, if people do not directly apply, we could also let people know that there's an opportunity to apply and reach out to them, so that Director of Planning may know some people. We all may know some people who would qualify. We wouldn't just by reaching out to them doesn't say you're on. It just says that, hey, it'd be great if you had a look at this, and we'd like to have an opportunity to consider your application. I think that may be necessary to do. Director of Planning.
Yeah, I do have a list of about 20 people who we could just notify about this this new design panel and see if any of them step up. We're really looking for 6 people, so hopefully between our collective knowledge and the newspaper advertisements and Facebook notices and the recruitment process, hopefully we'll get some of those.
Received an email the other day from a person who was interested in volunteering for some committee. Now, whether they would qualify for this committee, I don't know. But there are people out there who are interested in their public service in the community, and given that opportunity, for some, it's also an opportunity to get involved in local government, and with an ideal that, hey, there's an election coming up, maybe they'd like to throw their hat in the ring for that too. So I think so. You never know. People want to come forward. So don't know until we ask. Councillor Lumley.
She could be on the cat reduction committee.
Okay.
That'll be coming up soon. So we need lots of people.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Ledwick.
That's the last time I'll bring it up, but just back to my comment earlier, I'm still not really feeling satisfied. The wording in the bylaw right now says that it'll just be projects that come forward from the planning department, planning and development services, not necessarily the engineering department. And so that the way it's worded right now, it just means that it would come to us from the engineering department, and we would have to say, this is an interesting project. We have to make a motion to send it to the advisory panel. So it would just be nice if the ones that are really obvious could get some community, but that's my last time I bring it up, I promise.
Yeah, Corporate Officer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The problem with the obvious coming forward is that it might not be the same obvious to everybody. So to put it in the bylaw, I would need some pretty specific criteria. It might almost be better to leave a project to go to council to be referred back, so that council always has the opportunity to interpret what they want community input on, just because it's a very, I understand what you're saying and what type of projects, but it's a very difficult thing to describe in concrete terms that would fit in the bylaw. So that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, would there be room for a 2.1.2, and that would be council may refer projects to the advisory design panel directly. Gives council that basically acknowledges the council itself could refer projects. So if something came to council, whether it was from infrastructure, I agree that we shouldn't have every department in the town referring things to. There's got to be a vetting of that, but one of the vettings may be through council for some other projects. Director of Planning.
So under 2.1.1, it says the design quality of development applications, including but not limited to form and character, DP zoning amendments and OCP amendments, referred to it from Planning and Development Services Department, and we could say council, and to make recommendations to council.
Yeah. That would be fine for me. It allows that one further step that if an infrastructure project came to council and we said, well, we would like to have the wisdom of the advisory planning design panel on this, we could refer it to them. Yeah, and if the director of infrastructure was to lobby hard to the director of planning, it could go directly and see how it works. So yeah. I think that's just one other avenue, and I think that's appropriate. Yeah. Councillor Kroll,
With that amendment, I'd be prepared to move the recommendation.
do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Ludwig, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Lumley? Oh, you were voting. Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Question to the corporate officer, can this come forward tonight or is there an urgency on it? Or and can this and the other item we just dealt with in terms of the grant resolution come forward tonight?
If council would like to make a resolution, sending both those reports to tonight's meeting.
Yeah, it's what time is it now? It's just 4 o'clock. There's a little bit of time for the resolution to be brought forward. It's nice to get them on the ground on the way because you never know what's going to come up. So if Director of Planning is comfortable with that, then I would entertain a resolution to bring forward both those resolutions forward to council this evening for approval. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Lumley, seconded by Councillor Kroll. Any discussion on that? Councillor Kroll?
As long as it doesn't, cause flaming hoops for staff to be jumping through. Because I'm just looking at this evening's agenda. We've got a 6-page agenda, 7-page agenda this evening.
Yeah.
So it's already a fairly heavy agenda, and I know there's a couple of topics coming up that are probably going to be lengthy conversation.
In terms of the coming forward, we've all had the debate on it now. Unless Councilor D'Andrade has further questions, but if I'd be comfortable, resolutions coming from committees and we go fairly directly. So the only work is on getting staff to put the resolution together and getting an amended agenda to us all and to the community. So if the corporate officer feels that is within a reasonable time frame now, then I'm comfortable. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah. And opposed? Thank you. We'll see these tonight and then we can get on with it. Okay, is there nothing else on this agenda? So we'll go to next item is inquiries. Is there any inquiries from the public?
At this time, I'll ask anybody in the meeting as an attendee to please use the raise the hand feature found at the bottom of the screen, and we'll turn on your audio and video. I don't see any, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then next meeting of the committee of the whole will be held on Tuesday, February 16th at 3 p.m. And with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Lumley, thank you. All in favor of adjournment. And we'll see you all back here for 7 p.m. Thank you.